So I love the title of this chapter. Can you love me now? Who's
Yeah.
gone through any moment in your life where you wondered that question? Can you love me now? And you maybe even looked at somebody or to God and said, have you seen me lately? And those are those times where we know ourselves and we see the difficulties that we are, and so we wonder if we are lovable, right? So go back and think of some of the unlovable parts of you, the sticky points, and sometimes they're also your strengths, right? Because they're the places where you say, I will not bend, I will not be flexible here because this is too important. And so you poke other people with that inflexibility because it's so important to you. And so it brings up that, can that person love me? Even as I'm standing against them? How have you discovered that you are loved anyway?
Well, one of the things I do that annoys my family and maybe other people as well is I like things well ordered and planned out in advance. And I remember when my kids were little and we would get a new game and I would want to read all the directions before we started playing. And they're like, here's the game, Mom, read the directions, call us when you're ready. You know? And sometimes they're like, God, can we just play? But you know, when it comes to some things, planning's helpful. You know, we always have groceries in the house and other things that require thinking in advance. So
Thank God that somebody does that, right?
yeah.
The problem is, like with game playing, sometimes the reading of the directions makes it so that you say, but that rule you're saying right there isn't in the directions. That's something you've made up. And that often happens, I think, in our Christian lives as well. I think there's some rules that people have made up that aren't quite necessarily how God thinks. But when we get into those religious cycles, we hold on to some of those rules pretty strongly, don't we? And we kind of use it sometimes to beat each other over the head. A lady the other day said, hey, quit arguing with me. I've got the Holy Spirit with me.
Yeah.
I wrote her back and said, well, maybe the Holy Spirit told me to prophesy to you.
And that ended the conversation.
That ended the conversation. You know,
there can't be two Holy Spirits at work.
Well, yeah, and it would be much simpler if the Holy Spirit always worked according to whatever I thought. But the reality is that's rarely true, is it? The Spirit, God, is always larger than the small definitions we give, no matter how much we don't understand that. But I love this story where she was going along. I can't remember the whole story, but where she said, your steering wheel doesn't actually steer. Right? And we have to realize that sometimes what we think we're doing to steer the boat, to be in control, maybe isn't. And is that just our way of pretending that we are? We don't have to be perfect.
One of those sticky times for me was when I first started realizing my own limitations and summoned the courage to say no to some things and some people, and thought I was going to be friendless and without a family.
Yeah.
Because they were so used to my saying, yes, I do that.
Yeah. I think I told you, Judy, before, maybe all of you, about a friend of mine in Sun City where, I worked with the 90-plus-year-olds. I went and visited this one lady and she said, I used to, and she did her whole criteria, her whole list of everything that she'd been, right? Her resume of abilities. And she said, who am I now? We do a whole lot of that list, don't we? And we forget that that's not really who we are, is it? Who we are is much, much more than just that. Can we give ourselves permission to be that more, that other? A statistic that she threw out about how we think that we have 80% control of our lives, but in reality, it's more like 3 to 7%.
Yeah.
We think we have control of, like, for example, the TV because we can switch channels, but we can't control what's on any one of those channels, can we?
Yeah.
Right? I can choose different channels, but the channels are all the same. How are you becoming better at not being in control? What's helping you?
Well, I'm struggling with that now too. I mean, like Judy said, that some things I just can't do, or I do them and they exhaust me. And I'm like, why did I just work an hour in the yard and I'm exhausted? I used to be able to work all weekend in the yard. But that was 30 years ago that I could do that. And it's a hard adjustment to letting go of what you think you should be able to do, but your body, or my body at least, is telling me, no, you can't do that stuff anymore. You don't have control like you used to.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard.
And I think that's really difficult. I graduated in 1977, so people just older than me that went through the 1960s as thinking people. I went through as a 9 and a 10-year-old. You're not quite thinking at that point. And what the 1960s said is it changed from a very authoritarian place to a very freedom-based place. And it said essentially, you can change the entire world. And the 1960s has changed the world, but not as deeply and as meaningfully as what we wished, what we thought, what we hoped for. And that's kind of tough, isn't it? Because we had different visions and we became different, but not as different as what the 1960s visions told us we might. And is that okay?
Jim, I'd like to add something to that too. I think we, being activists in the 1960s, thought that the changes that we were working for would be permanent. And one of the big lessons is that the things that we are interested in are usually things that have to be kept working on. And so we're not reaching permanency. We're working on making things continue.
Yeah, and at least part of what this last year has been, Diane, is looking at one of the big successes of the 1960s, the Civil Rights Act, and the changing of race issues, and realizing that we didn't finish doing that work. Then it was an ongoing work. You don't just get to put your stamp on and say, there, that's done.
Yeah.
And this year reminded us, still out there. And we'd rather have there, it's done, wouldn't we? That's easier for our egos. We'd also rather have, I did it. That's really good for my ego. I did it. Instead of saying I did part of it and my kids will have to finish. I look at things like medieval castles and cathedrals and some of those magnificent buildings that went up in the Middle Ages, and they went up in stages. Nobody got to start it and finish it. Sometimes took hundreds of years. And are we okay with being just part of the hundreds of years of building? I think the difficulty, like my friend in Sun City, she thought what she was worth was what she was doing. And her worth was much more than that. She was loved beyond that doing. How is it that you have discovered that you are loved beyond whatever you do? That it's not your good deeds or your bad deeds that bring you into relationship, that there's something deeper than that. When did you discover, for example, that somebody in your life was choosing to love you even though? You can fill in whatever the blank is after that, even though. Because we do a lot of needing to earn each other's love, I think, too much with that. You have to prove yourself. You have to do the whatever. Who was it that just loved you unconditionally? Or chose to love you when you weren't lovable? Who was it for you?
Oh,
I
it
think
was
it
my
was-
grandmother. And then I think I've mentioned before with whom I got to spend 2 weeks every summer. And my mother complained one time that the only reason I liked to go to Shelbyville was because I got to do whatever I wanted. And I said, well, what was wrong with that? But it was that, not just that I got to do what I wanted, but that my being in my grandmother's presence was what she wanted.
Which is one of the great gifts that grandparents can give, isn't it? Is they can say, I don't have to do all the stuff. I can just be in relationship with.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's a great gift to be able to do, because parents do have to do some of the discipline and the boundary drawing. That's important work, but it's not the only important work, is it?
I'm thinking about right this minute because I can't think of any examples like Diane and Doris and Judy have given to answer your questions. But I know that you all accept and love me, even though I'm being quiet and what I think is, I evaluate as stupid. So I'm experiencing that kind of love right now.
Well, and Judith, through a lot of my life, I thought that having the right answer was what made me worthwhile. And I had lots of right answers, perfect answers. But I've realized that that's not what gives me value. That
And
sometimes,
I think I think of quiet as wisdom in many cases.
quiet is wisdom. I should qualify that just a little bit. Quiet is wisdom if we let it.
Mm.
We often don't let the quiet be wisdom in ourselves or in others. I think also along those same lines, flaws are wisdom as well. Some of our great wise spaces, or because of the flawed places we've gone through, the damage we've had to, the damage we've had inflicted on us, and the damage we've inflicted on the world around us, has given us some weirdness, some knowledge, some wisdom that we haven't had before that time. I think we sometimes knew that better when we were in smaller groups, right? When we were in a small town like Shelbyville, where there wasn't very many of you, and you had to deal with crazy Uncle Ernie, right? He was just part of who you were. I've been reading again the Harper Lee novel To Kill a Mockingbird, and it is filled with strange, bizarre, different characters, right? And yet it's magnificent in its scope, that in them Scout learns all kinds of ways of being and living. And that's how she becomes essentially the adult that she's going to become, in their weirdness. You are magnificent. You are wonderful. You are loved because of that weirdness, not in spite of. And I think that we often turn that around, don't we? If you get rid of, if you become cleaner, wholer, more perfect, then you'll be lovable. But sometimes it's your very quirks that make you who you are, why you are loved. My Granny May, she was a harsh woman in some ways. She was a pioneer woman. She had opinions about things. I loved her because of that, not in spite of that. How about yourselves? Who do you love because of the quirks that they are?
I love my sister Trisha. She's my younger sister, and she's even way more than I am, a planning type person. So when she comes to visit, she takes over my house. You know, she cleans my house. She tells me what we're going to have to eat. She tells me where we're going to go. And sometimes it really drives me crazy, but I love her for it. And it's a great gift. There have been many times when she's been the first on the scene of a family problem. You know, somebody sick or injured or something. She'll be on a plane the next day going to help out wherever she can. And so that's, you know, she's a gift to our family. She took my kids every summer for 2 or 3 weeks because she wanted to help out when I was working and she was staying home. You know, so, but still, she does sometimes drive me crazy.
Yeah, I could see that. And that's maybe the good reason why you have her come over for a while, and then you're just as happy when she leaves. You know, you love each other for the time that we can be together, but we also give each other the space between us.
I think that's true of most family and friends, good
Yeah.
in small doses.
Yeah, absolutely. In about 2 weeks, I'm going to go up to a family reunion, you know, all the Wilbanks together, and we'll see all the wonder and all the difficulties of each other. How about the rest of you?
I tend to be like Doris in terms of planning things. And yet some of my best friends are people who don't plan ahead, and they are among the most fun people. But I have to remember that they are among the most fun people when I get exasperated with them because I don't plan ahead.
Yeah. My wife and I took a test called the color test. You guys know what that is? It's just a real simple personality typing type of thing. And she's a gold. And she doesn't like being a gold. A gold is one of those people who plans and does and takes care of, and you know, the world makes the world run because she does things, right? And they had this sheet of paper that said, here's the types of gifts to give to a gold person. It was things like an organizer, right? Things like that. So I want those kinds of gifts. I want some of the gifts that are on your thing, you know, that are the more fun gifts. And
So are you, and what color are you on that
I
color code?
hit pretty equal on all three of the others: the orange, the blue, and the green. And the gold is about here,
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
down here somewhere. And so we fit together well because she does some of the planning, but she also says, why am I the one that's always planning? Why did I have to make phone calls for? Right? And I get that, I hear that. And I said, and I don't know how to answer it quite, because in my mind it's something like, well, because you're good at it and I suck at it, doesn't quite satisfy her. Because you like it and I don't.
But you'll never get any better if you don't do it.
I get that.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the things that she pointed out in here, though, is that honesty helps a lot about each other, right? And not expecting to see that person through my lens and saying only my lens helps. And one of the lines that struck me that she said, we are sick about polar bears, but be honest, cars are why anything about life works at all. Now, she didn't mean that because she thinks cars are more important than polar bears, but we have to be honest about what we put priorities on, right? And why we put priorities there. Are we willing to, for example, give up our cell phone, even if they're causing irradiation through them? You know, there's talk about the cell towers are doing that. They might be, but what are we willing to let go of in order to move towards that? With that other person, if I'm going to be in relationship with them, what am I willing to give up? And what of myself do I need to have be present? And I have to accept that in them as well. Do I want them to give up something that is precious to them? The people that are closest to you are usually those people who have in some way or another decided that whatever your weirdness, whatever your carelessness, whatever even your meanness is, they're choosing that as well as everything else. And what a gift that is, right? That they don't have to necessarily fix all that right now. Maybe they got a long-term goal to maybe get that out of you. But it's not going to be a right now thing. Whoever you are, whatever the wonder is that's inside there is amazing. So I think that when it comes to that honesty thing, I've learned in my life, I might as well just be myself. Because life tries to make us into perfect, act like you're perfect, even if you aren't. Hide away whatever it is that's imperfect. That's often been exercised in extremely bad ways. All of the prejudice against the LGBT community has been essentially a shut up about that. If you act like that's not there, then. But that's asking people to hide something essential to them, to make someone else comfortable. We don't want to work on that kind of world, do we? So what are the flaws that your dearest people allow you to just be? Who is it that allows you to not be the industrious woman that you always are, but the one who likes to sleep in an extra hour on on Saturday mornings, or whatever it happens to be? The people who get to see those sections of you that nobody else does. That's a good person to have in your life, isn't it? And how are you giving that gift to someone else? I love the quote she used from the Buddha that says, would you rather be right or happy? Do you in this moment have to fix that other person? Or can you just let them be the honest person that they are without having to fix that?
I think a corollary to that is if we're honest about who we are and what we need, then that allows other people to be more honest. Just an example, I'm an introvert and I love to be in big family gatherings, but it exhausts me to be around people for several days. And we had a family reunion 3 or 4 years ago. And my niece, who's also a big introvert, just one day, the second afternoon said, Ryan and I, we just got to go back to our room for a while because we just need to be alone. And, Ryan's her husband. And that just was such a gift to me to know that it's okay to say, this is exhausting. I need to get out of here for a while. Not that I don't love you, all my family, but I need space. And that was a gift to me to hear her say that, just totally unapologetically. I need space. And so if we can do that, then we can give that gift to other people.
That is also honoring yourself. And
Yeah.
that is a kind of honesty.
And I think that's a good place to transition over to our second chapter where it talks about the bodyguard, right? What are those boundary making things where you define yourself? Now, the tough part is the bodyguard can be good and bad, right? It can be the way that we keep people out, but it also can be the way that we keep ourselves together, right? How do we make sure that we are taking care of ourselves? Towards the end of the chapter, she said, I realized that the bodyguard protects other people from me saying what I honestly think about them and their decisions. But the bodyguard also protects me from me, that which hurts me because I say, I've got to be this or I've got to be that. But the bodyguard says, no, let's protect ourselves. So how do you draw the boundaries that allow you to be who you truly need to be? Because life will continually push beyond, especially if you're an industrious person. If you're capable, life will continually say, well, do one more thing. Your own head might say that to yourself and say, well, I can do another thing. I can be on this committee as well. How do you bodyguard yourself?
Well,
Well,
one of
then,
the things I do now, because I have learned that the things that I used to promise to be able to do and could do physically, I cannot do anymore. So not at the level I did. So I anticipate when I'm going to get tired and kind of pace what I have as expectations for me to do that day. And then when I can't meet all of those expectations, I lie down because that is the best thing for my body to be able to do the next thing that I have said I will do. Or if I can't do it, then to be honest and say, no, I can't do this after all. That's very different for me. And it feels physically good.
And much of your life, I'm sure you didn't give yourself permission, or did the life around you give you permission to do that as much as what would probably have been good for you? Because you probably needed a nap at 45 and 50 as much as today, but you didn't take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Judy, you were going to say something.
well, it just occurs to me that I'm aware that there are a lot of people that I know who really need to be heard. And I put myself in the position of being the listener, but sometimes what I'm hearing is so strident or uncomfortable for me that I have to pull back and find another mechanism. For instance, I can read a message on Messenger or on email, and it doesn't tax me as much as listening to it, the same message through my ears. I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes any sense to anybody, but
Yeah.
sometimes that presence or my active listening seems to be giving permission for some folks to just go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's healthy for them. They do need to be heard. Everybody needs to be heard. But to feel like, well, I'm on the right track here, so I'm going to keep complaining is not really what I want to give permission for. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to find ways in which I can still do that, because I think it's a gift I can give. But I don't want it to become tainted with constant complaining or actually stuff that's irrelevant. I also have not a lot of I don't know what it is. I have a short attention span for small talk. For people just talking about things that are really not an issue.
Yeah.
Or important. And it's hard to keep attending when somebody just wants to tell me some stuff I already know.
Yeah. Or wants to stay in just that small talk space and never go deeper. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or people who want to know the inside of me, but don't want to reveal anything about themselves except the exterior.
Yeah. I think it helps me to be able to know that everyone else is fighting this bodyguard thing, right? And that they've all learned boundary making for a lot of different reasons, right? If someone betrayed their confidence, their trust at some point or another, they're less likely to trust me in that conversation. And part of the challenge of life is stepping beyond and knowing when to step beyond that into this new space of relationship, whatever it is. And it's not always easy. I have a situation that I have to deal with. I was talking with Ed that's my Wednesday morning meeting. And we were talking about the places where, as a pastor, sometimes you have to go and listen to someone who you really want to look at and say, yeah, you're an idiot.
Or grow up.
Yeah.
Right? And yet part of it is being able to give that space of listening to that idiot, right? So that they hear at least, so that they're at least heard. And because at least in that hearing, then you get a chance to be able to say, let's take a step somewhere, right? Because maybe you can't change them, but you can put a different coloring into it than what they see by themselves. But you have to draw a different line than what you would have before that. And that's the difference between, as she would say, day 1 of the blackout and day 2 and day 3. You know, what we sometimes are doing on day 1 gets tedious by day 3. How do we continue to help each other through the blackout, the difficulty, right? One of the things that hit me particularly strongly in this section was where she talked about drinking espresso. And she said, I've always appreciated the first sip tremendously. But I realized that after that first sip, I stopped taking notice of it, right? And I don't realize when it's all gone. Do we continue to savor each sip of each other? Or do we take each other for granted? Each sip of the moment. Or does it just blend into the background in some way or another? Does he or she just blend into the background? How many have someone like the estranged husband of the girl who was living with them in your life? Someone that you know is bad for the other person in your life, and you want to fix that other person. You want to make them make choices around that other person. Anybody have anybody like that in your life?
Yes.
Mrs. Fix It, for sure.
Yeah. And they do not always, that your friend does not always do what you would do given the same moment, given the same choice.
Well, and in my family, if I voice an opinion like that, it's the last thing anybody's going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is probably wise on their part. That's their bodyguard.
Yeah.
That might be their bodyguard, exactly right. What we don't see usually in those dysfunctional places is we see what's dysfunctional. Yeah, I can tell you should just do something like that. But we don't see why that's a good place. So this morning on the way over, I listened to one of those commercials of the guy who says, let me get you out of your timeshare thing. Right? And I knew somebody who was having problems with timeshare, right? And so I said, have you checked this out? Well, they weren't really asking to get out of their timeshare, just they wanted this fixed because they had all kinds of reasons why they liked their timeshare, even though this was going wrong. And what I heard, oh, that's bad. You want to get out of it. And so I only listened to just the negative of it. I didn't listen to why it was good for them still. And I think that's what she was doing with her friend, is she was hearing just the negative of this guy, and she was saying, yeah, we got to throw him out, don't we? Do we sit with each other through the rest of the nights and days to be able to hear better than that?
It's hard when somebody's bad mouthing a partner and then they go back to them and all the things said to you about them.
Yeah.
It's very hard to accept their behavior.
But that goes back to, Judith, what we were talking about before. You think they've given you a steering wheel, and they haven't, right? They're just saying, let me unload all this so that I don't have to carry it by myself.
Yeah.
And they haven't really let you in completely. They've let you help carry the load. But I wish it was that they gave me permission to fix it, because I could fix it. I know.
There was a Facebook thing just the other day that was something in the line of, I have this problem I want you to help me with. And the response was, do you want comfort or solutions?
Yeah, that's good.
I think it's maybe a good question to ask. It might be offensive, but it's best to know going in whether people are wanting advice or whether they're just wanting to vent.
Yeah. And the problem is that we jump to of course I can fix it. We want to give the solution way too quickly, and that may not be their goal at all.
Yeah. And some people are really good about announcing, I just want to vent.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to do anything about it. I don't want you to do anything about it. I just want to spout for a while.
Yeah. Some of the steam's got to come out of my head.
Yeah, that's not, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. You have to pick who's going to listen and not decide that that's who you are all the time.
But I think all that we're talking about is what she meant when she said the wall around my heart had become more porous again. That we're letting that air breathe in and out, that love come in and out, rather than being harsh, don't pass through here type of walls. And I like that sense of porous. Are my relationships fixed? Sometimes they are. You know, we have a friend named Michelle. I think Michelle is always this way. You know, I call her Mrs. Kravitz. And I know she's not. And I have to keep reminding myself, she, as well as all our other friends, are much more than just that caricature I would put on there.
She can't be that because my daughter claims to be that.
Yeah, maybe so, right? And am I porous enough to say what's true right now? You know, what is she struggling with today? But part of that is our relationship to darkness and light. In this chapter, I dealt with darkness and light wonderfully. Because we sometimes think it's only light that we have to aspire to, forgetting that darkness can show us an awful lot. And we put just a negative character on darkness, but the reality is that darkness is only a function of light. It's where something has gotten in the way of light, and so it gives a different character. And I loved where she talked about how if we don't have darkness, we wouldn't have things like painting, right? Because that paint depends on both darkness and light. We wouldn't have, oh, here's where she said it. We would have no painting, poetry, or song. Because all those very much depend on the interchange of light and darkness, the passing of this challenging space to get to some place of illumination, right? So what's the darknesses you've gone through that have helped you become what you are today? How are you better because you had to go through that difficult time? The other day on Facebook, I saw a meme that showed a pretty thick comforter laid down with another blanket on top of it and a pillow, and it said something like, "If you didn't go through this, you don't know what poor was." Right? That's the only bed you had, was just a comforter on the ground. And I think there's a certain amount of where that's true, right? That we learn something in those times where we're sleeping on the floor. And that might be darkness, but it's also the place where light was able to show us a different way. So which places of your life helped you to find find a way beyond?
Well, in retrospect, the season when I had polymyalgia rheumatica, which it still trips off my tongue rather clumsily, an autoimmune situation that took a long time to define, has prepared me for these on again, off again days, when some days I feel good and my joints seem to work pretty well, and the other days everything's stiff and tight and it takes me a long time to warm up to get to do anything. So that was kind of preparation for what was going to become the everyday sort of thing. At the time, it was really scary.
Yeah.
But I also learned a lot of compassion for people who are in chronic pain and don't have the out that I was able to find.
Yeah. But Judy, someone who's not that someone who hasn't had a close death to them can't be with you, but someone who has had a close death definitely makes it easier for them to sit with you in the midst of whatever death you're going through, right? If someone else has lost their father, they can understand what it feels like better than someone who hasn't lost their father when you're going through that same kind of time, right?
Yep.
So I like that she said, she asked those two questions. She asked each one twice. What if? And instead she juxtaposed them with what is? Do we, in the midst of everything, ask people, what if? Do we ask ourselves that, looking beyond, or are we just sitting in that space with each other and being with each other in that space? What is right now? One of the greatest gifts anyone ever gave to me was my friend Dana, who in the midst of my most difficult times, most difficult moment of my life, sat and just listened to me for 3 hours on the phone. It was just in the what is place. At least to me. Maybe she was on the side calling my mom. I don't know. But she was being with me in that moment of challenge. How about you? Who did that for you? Who at some point or another was just with you in the what is, and reminded you that the what is not a bad place to be in. I mean, difficult maybe, but that we can sit here.
I think being with my dad in the last couple of years of his life, he lived in Los Angeles and had advanced prostate cancer, and I would go over to LA almost every month to go with him to his doctor, to drive him and to consult with a doctor and see what was next. And just watching the way my dad lived through that period, and when he decided that he'd had enough treatment, he wasn't going to do it anymore, when he decided to sign the DNR and enroll in hospice, and just all of that was a good lesson to me about, what the future holds. Because there's some point, I mean, we could all get hit by a bus someday, but there's some point when we're gonna, I'm gonna have to make those decisions regarding myself. And just seeing the way my dad just took it very systematically. Here's what is, here's what the options are, here's what my decision is. And he never seemed upset by it. He was never in denial about the seriousness of the time he was in. And it just made it easier for me to be with him, that he was honest with himself about where he was, but also he was just a good teacher to me.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. We do a whole lot of get over it, don't we, to each other? And lines like big boys don't cry aren't really the best comfort. Aren't the most helpful, are they? But we do things like that on a regular basis. Instead, we have to live through times of darkness. And it can be amazing. See how, when she started this chapter, she's on this place of, we'll bond with each other, we'll take care of each other. But as the darkness stretch, we sometimes forget. But as she said, much actually does work all the time. Candles, water, soap, pets, walking, friends. What are the things that work all the time for you? And how do you extend that to each other? That's what I took out of this chapter, is we have to try to find those things where we continue to extend what the grace is in the moment, right? Maybe we wish it was overhead lighting, that we could just flick a switch and it's there, but maybe it's a candle for the moment, a bit of light that illumines this circle.
Well, Jim, we talk a lot about being in the present. And I think that is key here. And I'm not always sure what that means, except that when I'm in it, I know it.
Yeah.
And it's not just being in the present with someone, it's being in the present with myself. And that can be hard to do.
Yeah. And the hard part, though, is that we do lots of solutions. Like some people's, well, it'll be better in heaven type of theology. divorces us from the reality of right now. What are we supposed to be doing right now with each other? How is it that in this moment we're supposed to be together? But the other is simple and simplistic and non-relational in my mind. Can I just sit and cry with you in the moment that you need to cry? Can I just be there and lift you up in the moment that you're too tired to hold your own self up? Can I be the one who just gets yelled at because you need to let out that yell? Can I be the one who takes on whatever role needs to be done there? Can I be the one who allows you to continue to need the one that you wish, that I wish would get out of your life? Right? Can I let you still be calling him on the phone and not trying to solve that relationship the way I would? One of the lines that she said that was interesting to me was, sometimes the movement of grace looks like letting other people go first. I wasn't quite sure what to make of it, because that sounded surprisingly like, Jim, you don't have to have all the solutions all the time. And I know that that's not God's will, because God wants me to always be right. Can the movement of grace be letting someone else be in control of things? These two chapters were interesting because they were filled with questions and not perfect answers, because they were dealing with the reality of life. Life that doesn't always work according to our best answers.
Yeah, I was glad about all she had to say about the uprooted trees.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I like
Good image, wasn't it?
And they just were. They couldn't stand them up and make them grow their roots back down again. It's just what is.
Yeah. Just what is. You know, part of the problem is that we've gone beyond some of the more simplistic faith that our ancestors had. Some of the stuff that we fight against on a regular basis are some of those things that can be very disempowering, because we're busy saying, well, God's just in control of everything, so I should just let God handle it. And I struggle with that, because I want to say, no, I think God wants us to do something. But sometimes that was developed because they realized better than we did that they can't control everything. We think we can control everything too much today.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about her writing is that she's so honest about her own flaws. And
Yeah.
I underlined one of these passages where she and Neil go out for a walk on day 3. And she said, I tried to feel like I was one with the spirit of the gale, the fierce and magnificent force of the earth. But then sand flew into my eyes and I could feel my skin getting blotchy, and Neil had begun to annoy me. And I just think that's so much how life sometimes comes at us. We get these great expansive feelings and then sand gets in our eyes. But she's so honest about that, about how things are really true.
Yeah. And I think what we try to do too often, Doris, is we try to make it like that deeply moving spiritual retreat that I went on. And we want to have that be our everyday experience. And I truly believe that those type of experiences are really strong because we have to go back to the relatively mundane parts of life. And we just get to hold that up as a guiding light, not live in it forever. But I think that some people, like my friend that I was telling you about before on Facebook, that likes to say that wanted to think she's the only one, and she's the one that always has spirit always talking through her. Well, I don't think any of us always has spirit talking perfectly through us. I don't think any of us lives in a space of great spiritual illumination and enlightenment all the time. And I think Anne Lamott said something along the lines of illumination is a stand-in for a positive spiritual experience. You know, we get illuminated and we think now we have the truth, or now we have this. We hold up to that when that's not the universal. We'd like it to be, wouldn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we haven't solved all the issues. I haven't turned you into perfect spiritual beings yet. Is that okay?
You just keep trying.
We have 2 more chapters, our last 2 chapters for next week. So next week we'll fix you perfectly.
Eh.
Hey, I want to tell you about what I'm going to do afterwards. And this will be starting in the middle of July. I'm going to be using this book. Have I told you about that?
Mm-mm.
No, but it's a gem.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's a Rhythm of Prayer, it's called. It's edited by Sarah Bessey. I've got a couple of copies here if you want one. And it's just a series of different essays and poems and whatnot that are trying to figure out what prayer is. And so I want to use it. I want to use it so that we begin writing together, right? And then we encourage each other to write, because at least part of what writing is for me is not that you have perfect expression, but that you're trying to express. And that we can encourage each other to try to express. And so as we read through here and see the different ways that some people write, maybe it will help us to find our own voice. Okay, so that will start. Can't remember which day, but sometime after the first part of July. Okay. All right, my friends, thank you for your time today. I will see you next week at the same hour.
Glad you're home.
It's good to be back.
Give my love
Okay.
to Josh.
I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.